Victoria is a Tier 8 premium Spanish battleship, and it was the reward for one of the previous campaigns in World of Warships Legends. Couldn't tell you which one at this point, it all sort of bleeds together in my mind. But I do recall when this ship was released, getting the sense that the community was a bit skeptical about how good it might be. And I think at the time I gave it a pretty favorable review and thought it was pretty decent. Well, now in August 2026, it has received a buff. So apparently, both the spreadsheet and Wargaming were also a little bit skeptical about how well this ship could perform. Before we get into any of those details, I'll show you the commander build. I believe this is the only battleship commander for the Spanish Navy in World of Warships Legends at this point. Jose Ferrandiz y Nino, and we have him fully maxed to rank 16-4 with Kondo and Swirsky as his inspirations. He's built for a little bit of main battery accuracy, a little bit of turret traverse and extra damage, and survivability between Master Mechanic and the Fight Fire with Fire skill. I think it's a pretty decent build, especially, of course, the 12.3 km, allowing you to get closer to the enemy. But the reason I always thought Victoria was pretty good was because of this Ready Rack gimmick. We fire one salvo at the Andalusia, do 20,000, follow that up with another salvo immediately that gets less good results, but it's 26,000 damage in total right off the bat to an enemy heavy cruiser. And of course, the Victoria has that gimmick permanently. Every time you reload these guns, you get two salvos for the price of one. There's a slight delay, I think, between when you can fire the two salvos, but I don't think it's any more than 3 seconds. So effectively, what you have is a permanent built-in main battery reload booster, one of the most powerful consumables in the game. Although I think the reason that upon release the community might have been a little bit skeptical about the Victoria is because the AP maximum shell damage is not all that impressive, and that remains the case even post-buff. The maximum AP shell damage on Victoria is 9,000, although we have the gyrating drill bit skill active, which buffs the turret traverse, of course, nerfs the speed a little bit, but in return you get a buff to the AP damage. And so we're at 9,720, just south of 10k. Not exactly impressive if you compare it to literally any battleship at Tier 8. However, unlike every other battleship at Tier 8, this thing gets to fire its main battery guns twice every time it reloads. Everybody else only gets to do it once, unless they've got the main battery reload booster, which of course Victoria does have that on top of this Ready Rack gimmick. But everything else that has it is only going to have it, 2 times at best, so you're going to be able to do it twice a battle. Victoria can do it literally every time, and so the fact that it only deals 9,000 damage per AP shell, I think is mitigated by the fact that you're never just shooting 9 shells, you're shooting 18 shells for every salvo. So I think it makes sense from a balancing standpoint that the alpha would be a little bit reduced in light of that. And of course, the buff that it received did nothing to touch that alpha, but it did improve the AP parameters. According to the Ministry of Balance article, as we take another shot here at the Andalusia and finish what we started early on in this battle, using the Ready Rack to secure our first kill, but according to the Ministry of Balance article, the Victoria had its AP shell air drag reduced, improving AP shell penetration by something like 4 to 7%, depending on the distance. The bigger the distance is, the bigger the buff is. And I don't, of course, remember what the AP penetration said on the specs page prior to the buff. I have no way of knowing whenever a ship is going to get buffed or not. I suppose once the patch notes were released, I could have taken a note on it, but I didn't. So it's hard to compare it to what the numbers said previously, but I can tell you right now, the armor penetration at point blank on this AP is 880.9 millimeters. Now you would expect something like that. At point blank range in a battleship, you should be able to get through pretty much any armor that you're going to encounter, and that is as true for the Victoria as it is for any other battleship in the game, really. The main stat to pay attention to would be the armor penetration at maximum range. And according to the specs page for Victoria, that is 558.6 millimeters. Now, that should be enough, I would think, to get through the broadside armor of practically any battleship you're going to encounter. I mean, even if you consider the most heavily armored battleships in the game, they are probably going to have a belt armor around 406 millimeters at best. And maybe behind that belt armor, there's a citadel plate of something like 30 millimeters or maybe a little bit more. In any case, I think this would be enough penetration to get even through an armor scheme like that at maximum range. And with flammable cannoneer, the maximum range on the Victoria is 18.1, which I would say is fairly respectable, although at base it's only 16.8. And if you don't build into the range at all, you don't lose out on the penetration at maximum range, because of course AP pen falls off with distance, and the more distance you have on the main battery range, the more the AP pen falls off. So at base, with the 16.8 kilometer range, the penetration's 575, and then it only falls to 558, which is not even a loss of 20 millimeters of pen for 2 more kilometers. And I suppose prior to this buff, that number would have been lower. So that certainly helps the Victoria. But the other thing would be the penetration angles on the AP. Prior to the buff, they were conventional pen angles. The minimum ricochet angle was 45 degrees, maximum was 60. That is standard across any ship with AP that doesn't have improved pen angles. Now, the buff was relatively small. It was only a change of 5 degrees. So now in August of 2026, Victoria's minimum ricochet angle is 50, guaranteed is 65. That'll simply mean your shells penetrate a little bit more often on angled targets than they otherwise would have. And you know who is a good candidate to demonstrate that is USS Iowa. Now, I don't think you could ever accuse the Iowa of being one of the best armored ships at Tier VII, and it tends to take damage across its hull from all kinds of angles just because of all the flat surfaces. You can see in this little sequence here that he's slightly angled to us. We are going to launch our spotter plane in the air. I think we took that shot while it was in the air, so it affects that salvo. It certainly does the second. And even on the slightly angled Iowa, well, that's like 14,000 damage between the two salvos, with a lot of pens and not a tremendous amount of ricochets. I suppose that is the power of improved penetration angles. I don't know though. We maybe could have got those same results on the Iowa with a ship that just had really good pen and not improved pen angles. In any case, the Iowa is sunk. There's only 3 ships left alive on the enemy team, one of which is the Mirage. If I recall correctly, that's just a copy paste of the Amalfi, and not exactly the most heavily armored cruiser out there. And then we've got the enemy Victorias somewhere in front of us, also spotted by the DD, so we know he's within 12.3 km. Not exactly sure where, but I doubt he would be in the enemy spawn area. He's probably more like in the Bravo cap. In fact, he definitely is, because the Amalfi copy paste is not in there. Or maybe he is. I actually can't. Yeah, no, they're both in there. There's the Kitakazi. Maybe we'll take a shot at him with the ready rack here. It does seem to like the dispersion, well, maybe not there, but when the shells first left the guns, that looked really, really good. Damage against the Kitakazi, for overpens, that's alright for a destroyer, even though we're only doing like 970 damage per overpen. Victoria comes around the corner, hits us with his improved pen angles. You see he gets a 10k salvo there right through the bow. I don't know if that would have penetrated prior to the buff, maybe. I suppose we're not fully angled, and, well, for his part, Victoria is doing a little bit better than we are. However, there's a problem with this Italian battleship hull design, because I think this is just a Roma or a Veneto that was given to the Spanish Navy. And if you look at the rear of the ship, past the third turret, you see this little step between the deck on the middle part of the ship and the stern. That little step has a flat surface of armor just beneath that third turret, And if you're pointing that flat surface of armor at some enemy ship and they shoot it, there's a lot of real estate there for it to catch the shells and to pen them. It's almost like a third broadside as a kiting angle on this kind of hull. We don't need to exploit that, though. We just get the Citadel on the slightly angled Victoria, probably thanks in part to the improved pen angles. And that's pretty much all there is to this battle. I suppose the Kitakazi is still alive. He's retreated from the Bravo cap. No telling exactly where he went, but he is spotting us somewhere around the confines of this dissipating smokescreen. Yeah, he's right there. He's got torpedoes going for the friendly cruiser. And I guess he gets him, to his credit. GG to the Kitakazi. That reduces the blue team to a count of only 3. And our cruiser is relatively low HP. So is our destroyer. I'm not, but I think the Kitakazi just gave up all of his torpedoes, so he's kind of out of luck now. Even though there are 4 minutes left to go in this battle, maybe there would be some way for him to win, but not like that. He goes down, and we achieve victory in this battle. Not exactly the most impressive result you've ever seen, I'm sure, but a solid 136,000 damage done and 2,700 base XP. Now, if you're like me, you thought the Victoria was pretty good because of the Ready Rat gimmick right on its debut, I don't think your opinion on the ship is going to change all that much. It's certainly better than it was, thanks to the improved AP pen and pen angles. But if you were a Victoria skeptic, maybe you should try the ship again. I think these improved pen angles probably go a long way to making it a pretty decent ship at Tier 8. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.